Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back for another week of Rank the Movies. We're still on our horror movie franchise month, and this week we're talking about one I really like. I didn't care for it when it first came out, but it grew on me a lot, and I've really come to enjoy it. Of course, we're going to answer that question with this franchise like the rest. Is it good, is it bad, or is it average? I've never covered a bad franchise yet, so maybe drop that in the comments. Some horror movie franchises I should check out that I might not like. Because obviously I'm talking about ones I like, and I'm just gauging if they're good, bad, or average based on my individual preference of each movie. So far I've gotten a lot of ones I liked that ended up being good franchises. One average, which was the Alien franchise, which is sad because I really do like the Alien franchise. It's just, individually, those movies aren't great. So let's get into it. We're talking Saw and its large series of films. And of course that means we have to talk about the first one. Saw, which was a very low-budget horror film. It's got a couple decent actors in it, Carrie Yules and Danny Glover, but it's really low budget. I'm going to try to go over the plot, but it's one of these slasher films, so again, without going beat by beat, it's going to be very broad paces. You have two people who wake up in a dingy basement. They're both chained to the legs to pipes. They find out that they're playing a game. Basically, the game is to test themselves to see how much they want to live, and the murderer is named Jigsaw. Jigsaw has been testing other people. A detective named David Tapp, played by Danny Glover, has been investigating Jigsaw, believes Jigsaw is actually Dr. Lawrence Gordon, who is played by Carrie Yules, who's in the trap. And after his partner is murdered while trying to apprehend Jigsaw, Detective Tapp begins following Gordon to prove he is Jigsaw. And tapping Gordon's phone, watching his apartment, hiring someone to follow him. So Gordon is in this trap with the person who's been following him and taking photos of him, although they don't know that right away. They're each told they have an objective. The photographer's objective is to survive. Gordon's objective is to kill the photographer within a certain period of time, or his family will die. The two men try to figure out how to get out of this trap, as there's another body in there with them, but it's a person who shot themselves because they are so diseased it was the easier solution. The game unfolds and you learn all these other things. This is really a movie about flashbacks, which is really quite interesting. At the end, you have the legendary moment of Lawrence Gordon chopping off his foot, believing his family is still in danger. Because the time limit has expired, though, Tapp has figured out what is going on and has actually saved his family already, but Gordon has no way of knowing that. He chops off his foot and he exits the room, leaving the photographer in the room alone with the dead body. The dead body then stands up to reveal that he is actually Jigsaw, who has been lying motionless this entire time to monitor the game. Jigsaw then exits, quoting the catchphrase of this series, "Game over," as he shuts the door, locking the photographer in the room. It's happened with every one of these movies. I generally have not ranked a first movie of a series, except maybe Star Trek. Star Trek the Motion Picture, I think, is the only one that did not get a good ranking in a franchise month yet. But Saw, it falls into the mass group. The first one is really good. It's a very enjoyable movie. Again, it's a flashback movie. It is a story told through flashback. But it's still a very enjoyable movie. That brought us to Saw 2. The success of Saw made them release a sequel 1 year later, and subsequently all these sequels would come out about a year after the previous one each time. Saw 2 sees a different game. There's always a mild plot, and then you have the game. This one is the nerve gas house. Basically, it's a bunch of people who are in a house. They have to figure out why they're there, solve puzzles, but there's deadly nerve gas being released that will kill them in a certain period of time. On the other hand, the plot of the movie is another detective has found Jigsaw's warehouse. They've captured him. You find out Jigsaw is very sick, very dying of cancer, and just wants to be heard. If the detective will sit and listen to Jigsaw for the correct amount of time until the game is over, he will get his son back, because his son is part of the game. The detective is goaded this entire time by Jigsaw as they watch closed circuit feed of the nerve gas house and people dying for various reasons, from the games, from each other, because these are criminals who the detective all put in jail. Which is why his son is in a lot of danger, because they probably won't be happy to find out that the person who put them in jail, they're there with the son. The detective fails his game, beats the hell out of Jigsaw, and forces him to take him to the nerve gas house. Arriving there, you find out that the nerve gas house was all pre-taped footage. And it already happened. His son is in a safe spot, which happens to be a safe inside of Jigsaw's workroom, where he has oxygen and everything else. He survived the room because Jigsaw has an apprentice, who's actually in the first one, caught in one of the traps in the flashbacks. And she's in the nerve gas house. She ends up attacking the detective because she was wrongfully accused by him and put in jail. And he gets hooked into the basement to be left without really a game, because he failed his game. His game was sitting and listening to Jigsaw and letting the Jigsaw game play out. So Saw 2, this is the one that I'm really most divisive on over time. I call it an average movie now. When I first saw it, I would have put it as bad. I didn't care for it. But after multiple viewings, it's grown on me over time. And now I actually rather enjoy the movie. It's average. It's not bad. It's average. We then run to Saw 3. We open with the detective. He breaks his leg, his ankle, to get himself out of the shackle, and he crawls away. Amanda, the apprentice, eventually finds him. They get into a scuffle. She wins, escapes, and he is found again by Jigsaw and taken to safety to be used in a later game. We'll get to that game in a different movie. The plot of this one and the game are very closely knit. Jigsaw's still dying of cancer, but he can't go to a hospital because, well, everyone knows who he is now, and that's not an option. So a doctor is kidnapped to try to prolong Jigsaw's life. She's given a collar with a bunch of shotgun shells and triggers that will blast them into her face if she does not obey. At the same time, another man is playing a game where he is dealing with his grief over the death of his son by facing the people who were involved. It was a hit and run, but the witness never came forward, although they saw it. The judge was very lenient on the criminal himself, and he has to face all of these trials to get himself over his grief. Eventually you learn that the doctor and the dude in the game are actually husband and wife. And that the test wasn't just for them, it was also for Amanda to see if she had actually learned anything while being Jigsaw's apprentice, because she had begun designing traps on her own that were inescapable. Because actually the movie opens, the second trap of the movie is one of the other cops, because a cop dies in every movie. One of the other cops in a trap that they actually win, but they can't escape it. So they're killed because the time runs out on them, but they actually do everything that they're told to do to escape their trap. So with her being now just a murderer instead of, being a tester, testing these people, Jigsaw is now testing her. She fails miserably. The woman gets her head blown off, and the husband does not learn anything as he kills Jigsaw to end the movie. Saw 3 on my scale. I like Saw 3. This is the one that sold me on this series. I saw Saw and I went, that's not bad, that's pretty decent. I saw Saw 2 and went, that's not, nah. I saw Saw 3 and I really loved this movie. This is what made me go, I want to see more of this. I want to go back and rewatch the original first two and see what I've missed there. Because I enjoyed what they did with this movie and the progression and everything. A lot of people say this is torture porn and gore, but I actually really do enjoy the character and the plot of these movies, which there isn't a lot of it, but when it's there, it is spot on. It is good. Which is what draws me to these movies. It's not the torture, and it's not the gore. It's actually the character and the plot. It's not a lot of it, but what's there I like. We go to Saw 4. Jigsaw is now dead. A new detective shows up and finds a tape that Jigsaw had covered in wax and swallowed. Basically, it says it's not over. Officer Riggs, he's part of the SWAT team. He was part of the SWAT team in the first one, in the second one, when they raided Jigsaw's lair. And he worked very closely with both the cop who's now disappeared, the detective who's disappeared, and the detective who died in the Jigsaw game. He is put to the test because he does not follow simple instructions such as do not breach a door if you know it is unsafe. He is put to the test by being shown criminals, shown what they have done, and leaving them to be tested by Jigsaw or attempting to save them. That is what his game is to teach them to follow instructions. Just leave them to their fate. They could survive or they could fail. You don't need to assist them. At the same time, there's another pair of FBI agents who have shown up to investigate because they believe there is another apprentice other than Amanda Young, who is now dead. They believe there's another Jigsaw apprentice, and that they are somehow connected in with the police. As the movie plays out, you find out that the detective who failed his game in the first one and broke his leg in the second one is part of this game with another cop. Basically, the final challenge of Riggs, all he has to do is let the time run out before breaching a door. That's it. That's all he has to do. But of course, Riggs doesn't think that's what's going on. He thinks he has to save them before time runs out. So obviously, Riggs breaches the door when he gets there, and the detective is finally killed. Yay! You should never say yay that someone is finally murdered in a movie. But seriously, I was ecstatic that this character was done. There's some gunplay. Everyone in the room dies except the other cop who is, because they're on a scale. One is in an electric chair, the other one's on an ice cube, and basically if too much ice melts, the scale goes off and the electric chair goes off, and the dude on the ice is being hung. The dude on the ice is killed because that's the detective. The other detective stands up, and you find out he is Jigsaw's new apprentice. His name is Detective Mark Hoffman. Mark Hoffman then cleans up a little bit to make sure nobody knows he was there. That he was involved anyways. He was known there. They know he's been kidnapped. And he goes, he walks into a room where you find our main character from the previous movie, the husband, who has just slit Jigsaw's throat. That's right, this has all been a prequel happening congruently with the third movie. He is then shot by the FBI agent. I'm sorry, it's the FBI agent who finds our hero from the previous movie, as his partner has been attacked by Jigsaw and is in critical condition. That is where the movie ends. The dude, Hoffman, locks the other FBI agent in a room, and we go to black. Hoffman carries a little child out as a hero. Saw 4, it's an average movie. It's not bad. It's really cool when you get to the prequel aspect of it, or that it's congruently happening with the previous movie. That's really cool. But the rest of it, it's not bad. It doesn't have that same level. Like, everything I loved about Saw 3, this one tried, and it just didn't quite get to it. That brings us to Saw 5. Saw 5, the main game, has nothing to do with the story of the movie. It's just a bunch of people being tested in a series of traps because they all were involved in the burning and the cover-up of an apartment building where people lived. Either they were the ones who actually lit the fire, paid to have the fire done, or covered it up through reports and newspaper articles. The idea of the game is that they keep killing each other, kill off one person to get through each level of the trap, and then they find out at the end they could have succeeded all the traps without killing anyone, and then it would have been a less taxing end. It has nothing to do with the plot of this movie, besides, that's the game. The actual movie is our FBI agent finds that the other FBI agent has died, and he begins to investigate, because he escaped the room after being put into a jigsaw trap, where his head is, actually, the poster kind of shows it, his head is encased in a glass case that's filled with water. He ends up tracheing himself so he can breathe until he's rescued. He escapes the game, which was meant to kill him. It wasn't a jigsaw game where you have so much time to do this. He was just meant to die. So he is still alive, just with a hole in his throat now. And he begins to investigate, finding out who the new Jigsaw apprentice is. Believes it's Mark Hoffman, because Mark Hoffman walked out of that room alive. And everyone else in that place was dead or meant to be dead. So he believes it's Mark Hoffman, begins investigating it, until the end of the movie, where he is set up. His cell phone is left at the test site, so his superior in the FBI can find it, and he himself is lured into a trap. This is an actual test where all he has to do is trust Hoffman and do as he's told, and he'll survive. He doesn't, and he's crushed to death. Saw 5, it's bad. It's my least favorite. I think it's because the trap is essential to the plot. 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 The trap is not essential to the plot. This movie could have not had a trap in it, and it might have been better. That time might have been better spent elsewhere than the trap, or they should have figured out a way to bring the trap to be essential to this movie. Because it's not. It's not a key element in this film. That brings us to Saw 6. This is the first Saw movie I actually went to go see in theaters. I was in college at the time. Saw 6, this one has a more focus on the game and less focus on the we need to find the apprentice kind of aspect of it. So I'm gonna do that in reverse from the previous one, because they're not fully connected, but they're connected enough. But there's some loose threads that pull them together more than just the end of the movie. Basically, our dead FBI agent who's been crushed to death, his hand was left because he was gripping the ceiling, and Hoffman begins using that to leave fingerprints on crime scenes to further implicate him into it all. However, it is also discovered that one of the victims was not killed by Jigsaw, that the tape was altered, and it's not actually John Kramer Jigsaw's voice on that tape, and they're beginning to analyze it, to remove all the filters, to find out whose voice it really is. It's Hoffman's voice, because Hoffman flat out murdered someone, and made it look like a Jigsaw murder, and that's how Jigsaw found him. I think that was all explained in the 5th one, but again, I hate the 5th one, so it's just easier to explain it here. At the same time, Hoffman and John Kramer's ex-wife are dealing with Kramer's final wishes, because he's dead, he has final wishes, which is primarily going to his wife, but there's some funneled to Hoffman through her. His final wish is this test that's going on, which is a friend of John Kramer who actually ran an insurance company, a fraud division of an insurance company, who came up with a method to figure out if people should be given coverage or not. This method denied John some experimental cancer treatments when he was alive before he started killing people. And now he is being put through this test to test the various points of his policy. So that's actually really cool. And the traps are really interesting as this guy progresses through it. Unlike a lot of these other movies where the person doesn't actually learn anything as they're going through the traps, and it just looks like everything Jigsaw does is super ineffective and people can't grow. This guy actually does. He actually does see the world in a different way as he progresses through, until he comes to the end where he's face to face with his sister and a wife and son of a patient who's just died because he didn't get coverage. And they are given the option to inject this guy full of hydrochloric acid through a bed of needles, or let him live, and they don't let him live. So the one person who's actually grown and learned and might actually come out a better person at the end of this game is still killed. It's great. It is a great moment. Also, Hoffman is outed. They figure out he is the second apprentice, and he is set up by Jill Tuck, who is John Kramer's widow, in an attempt to kill him as well, to just finish off Jigsaw's work. He escapes, and that's where the movie ends. Saw 6, as much as I hate Saw 5, I really like Saw 6. I really like the fact that we finally get a character who's actually really learning and bettering themselves through the game. And I also like the setup more, because where Saw 5, I just didn't give a crap about any of those people because they were all a-holes. This one, the dude is generally likable who's running this thing. And his ideas of insurance, although are very bad to help people, make a lot of sense for an insurance company. So he can be likable while being a douche, and I like that. I like that he can be a likable douche, that he can do douchey things, but you can still like him as a character. So I like Saw 6. That brings us to Saw 3D, the final chapter. This one, or Saw 7 as other people like to refer to it. This one sees Mark Hoffman going to try to kill Jill Tuck. That is his goal in this movie, he wants to kill Jill Tuck. The game of this one is a survivor of the Jigsaw games who's written a book and is trying to help people. Jigsaw knows he was never tested. This dude lied, created the wounds, just because if someone isn't traumatized, they could make a lot of money off of selling the help to people who have been through this actual trauma and survived. He is actually put through a test where all the people who helped cover up the lie, his publicist, his best friend, his agent, are basically the three monkeys: see no evil, hear no evil, speak no evil, and he has to try to save them while progressing through. Obviously, each test is based on one of those. One is a volume test, one is a sight test of guiding a blind person through a very dangerous place, and the other one has to do with more of the hearing aspect of it all. And they all die. At the end, his fiancée is going to be burned alive in a golden idol if he can't actually perform the trap he said he survived, which was taking 2 meat hooks, shoving it through his pectoral muscles, and then raising them on a crank up to a higher bar to connect 2 wires. So he has to actually pass the test, take the test he said he lived through in order to save his fiancée. He fails, she dies. Hoffman succeeds at killing Jill Tuck after a lot of setup. It's a pretty interesting setup, but it's not worth going over. Jill Tuck is killed by Mark Hoffman, and then you find out Lawrence Gordon from the first movie, way back when, the first movie, has been a secret apprentice of Jigsaw, helping him out because he saw the problem with his life after being tested. He captures Mark Hoffman and locks him away in the dingy toilets of the trap that Dr. Gordon was in, without any way of escaping. And that is where this movie ends, with Mark Hoffman being dead. There is no more Jigsaw apprentices. It's an average movie. I don't mind Saw 7. It's not bad. It's not great. So we got one movie left, because they did make another sequel recently, within the last couple of years. So right now we're looking at just the original 7 films. It would be average, because we have the one bad one, and then it's a 50-50 split. The bad one would drag this to an average series, so let's see what the last movie can do with this average. So we have Jigsaw. This was the last entry in this series to date. There's one more coming out called Spiral, from the story of Saw, from the book of Saw. I want to see it, but because of COVID it hasn't come out yet. But I do want to see it because it looks good. It's got Chris Rock and Sam Jackson. I'm excited. But we have Jigsaw. Basically, this is told really well and very nicely. You have new Jigsaw murders popping up at years after John Kramer has died and his apprentices have fallen off the face of the earth. More bodies begin to show up in the context of the Jigsaw games. And as they're being investigated, you're seeing this game play out. But what you find out at the end, I'm just cutting this, because this is the important part. You find out that this is all flashback. That the game that you're watching actually precedes the first movie. It's one of John Kramer's tests to see how everything would work, how he would test groups of people. And one of the people he is testing is the doctor who mislabeled his x-rays, which kept his disease from being caught sooner so he could be treated, and inevitably led to his weakened state, which led to his death. The doctor doesn't die in the test, but he ends up becoming a supporter of Jigsaw and is now becoming the new apprentice, as he has a beef with a police detective who is a very underhanded and shady detective. So he's using his game that he went through to lure him into his own test. Overall, I'm not a huge fan of the new apprentice angle. This would have been a sole prequel. I probably wouldn't have had that. I don't know. It's a good movie. I like it. That is my biggest problem, is that there's a new apprentice. I feel like after you've had 3, because now you've had Amanda Young, Mark Hoffman, Lawrence Gordon's technically an apprentice, and now we're adding in. This is too many apprentices for this kind of thing. That is my biggest problem, but all of the good that this movie does, and the good storytelling, and the interesting twists and turns of it make it rise back up into a good movie. So at the end of the day, we have 4 pieces in the good side. The average side is bringing it down a little, and bad pulls it down a little more. This is probably right on that line of good and average is where this series falls if you look at the movies by themselves. Probably leaning slightly more into good than the average, but it's probably right on that line. So let's talk final thoughts on this series. So obviously my least favorite is Saw 5. Really, there's no point in the trap in this movie. And I think that's part of the interesting part is that, and everything else, it's connected to the plot. It's integral to the plot. This one is just there. So that really downgrades it for me. Saw 2 is my next least favorite. Again, I didn't care for it the first time I saw it. It's grown on me, but it hasn't grown that much. Then Saw 3D, the final chapter. The last 10 minutes of this movie are amazing. Everything getting there, it's not bad. It's more of what you've seen. Meh. Then we have Saw 4. Again, I like the aspect that it is congruent with Saw 3, but I think there's a lot of other pitfalls this movie has that doesn't make it as good as some of the other films. Next up, we have Jigsaw. I really did enjoy this movie. I liked it when I saw it. Again, my only problem is another apprentice. That's it. So I'm kind of curious what Spiral's going to be. You know, how that fits in. Is it an actual apprentice or is it just someone copycatting? Because I can accept a copycat who had no connection to John Kramer. I can accept that. I'm not sure I can take another apprentice. Our next place goes to the original Saw. It is a great movie. It is very well done. Even with the shoestring budget it had, it is a very well done movie. But I do like Saw 6 a lot. Like I said, I enjoyed the fact this character actually found redemption in his test, and I liked that fact. And I liked the fact that it still didn't change the outcome of these movies. That this person still died. I like that. I think it was interesting. And it really upped this movie a lot for me. And my favorite is Saw 3. This is the one that made me fall in love with this series. That made me really enjoy it and go back and rewatch it. And rewatch it again. And I rewatch it every year and a half. So this is the one that does that. Overall, I like the Saw series. It's a good movie franchise. Alright, well, next week we are continuing Horror Movie Franchise Month. We've got 2 more weeks of it. We've got The Purge and Final Destination coming up over the next 2 weeks. So click back for that. Hit subscribe if you want to see it. Hit me up with some comments if you got something to say. Like the video if you want to like the video. And don't forget to check out bonus content Thursdays tomorrow. Otherwise, I'll see you around. Have a good one.